Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. We are going to be continuing our conversation from last time where we were starting to talk about things like the Tower of Babel, how people aren't that creative, and how history has a tendency of repeating or rhyming, however you want to say it. So, in case we haven't met, my name is Karen.
And my name is Ashley, and yes, I'm excited to dive into this because this is definitely what I enjoy. I get
Yeah.
excited. Synchronicities and all of that
Oh,
too.
most definitely. Yeah. So, like, in case anyone doesn't know about the story of the Tower of Babel, I believe it's in Genesis, where basically the story goes according to the English version that we have translated, because I don't believe that it's properly translated. I think things are missed and lost along the way, as well as there are cultural changes too, because obviously we're not living during the Bible times, right? Like it's just a very different time period than it was back then. But the story goes that basically all of these people came together and they created this like giant tower, and they basically wanted to, in a sense, they wanted to become God because they were going to be smarter than God. And God basically stepped in and was like, no, you can't be smarter than me. So I am going to make it so that you don't speak the same language. And so he created it, all these different cultures, these different nationalities. We were kind of talking about this last time, where my question was, what is wrong with a one world system, right? Like, what is wrong with that? I never understood why that was a bad thing, even when I was a Christian, because Christians will be the first ones that are like, no, I don't want a one world government. That's scary. And I almost questioned, do they know why it's scary? What's the reason for it?
Yeah.
But that's kind of what got this whole thing started. So, and it is in Genesis, right, Ashley?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay.
Um,
I'm blanking on where it is. I've read through the Bible like 3 or 4 times, but I cannot for the life of me remember exactly where it is. So,
yeah, yeah. It's all in the Old Testament.
yeah,
So,
it's there somewhere. So, but yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting to me is about the whole story is my understanding of God, the universe, love, energy, whatever you want to call it, is that it is in a constant state of learning about itself. It's in a constant state of love. It's impossible for it to feel jealous. It's impossible for it to feel like someone else is going to step on their territory, like how the Tower of Babel basically, like the people were getting all smart together. And so God said, this isn't a good thing, right? Like it's impossible in my understanding of who God is, the universe. I don't care what you call it. It's the same thing. It's just energy, and the energy is love. It's impossible for it to feel that way because those feelings come from, we talked about this on the last one too, this density of gravity that causes this lower level vibration. And
yeah,
so that energy form of love, of God, of the universe, it's incapable of feeling like, oh my God, these people are going to be better than me, right? Like that in a sense is like it's a fear, right? And that for me is like a thing that we on this 3D plane experience, not something that a God of the universe actually can experience. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I had a hard time with Christianity too, because you look at God from the Old Testament and God from the New Testament, and God from the Old Testament is displayed, and Christians even support it as a very revengeful, wrathful God
yeah,
that basically, like, if you don't believe in me, you're done. And even in the New Testament, if you don't believe in me, you're done, kind of thing. And
yeah,
that just does not work at all. Like there's no, in my experience, and all my experience comes from meditation and experiencing this energy called love and going, oh my God, I got it wrong the whole time. I was a Christian. I got it wrong the whole time because it's impossible to feel anything but love the closer you get to source energy. And so it's wild to me that we have stories like the Tower of Babel.
Hmm. Well, and that's the thing, like when we were talking yesterday or yesterday last week about the Tower of Babel and like the one world government, it was like, okay, so where did this come from then? Like, because I don't believe that there's a God that did this. I do believe that we're ruled by um like a spiritual aspects, but it's different than one God.
Mm,
And so I also think that there are elites, maybe they're extraterrestrials, I don't know, but I do believe that there's elites that control our current social setting
mm,
that benefit and are controlling the media, that are controlling the government. And I do think that that is starting to come to light.
mm,
Um, so I was like, that kind of makes sense. And that's where I kind of got excited at that last podcast, where it would make sense that these elites would be like, oh no, we need to stop this. Like they're getting too close. And we've talked about like Kevin Trudeau in our podcast before and how he was a part of like different secret societies.
mhm.
And he would talk about how they wanted to keep the secrets to themselves
Right.
and the secrets to the elitists. And so then that makes sense with the Tower of Babel too, that they're like, oh no, they're getting too close to our secrets, we need to clear them away
Hmm.
and cause confusion. And I think that's one of the things like we've also mentioned with like TikTok being close to shutting down because it's giving people a platform to talk freely, and we're getting too close to the secrets because we can talk freely or
Mm.
almost freely. I know there's some
Yeah.
different things there.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of misinformation as well on TikTok, but yes, absolutely. So, I mean, and you were talking about this before that like, um, uh, and you'll have to expound on this more because I have my own thoughts on it as well, but that humans aren't necessarily creative enough to create that kind of change. So explain that a little bit too, because that goes
What
a
do you
little bit.
mean there, sorry?
Well, we were just talking about how humans aren't creative, right? Like that things just repeat over and over again,
Yeah.
right?
So like that's like with like stories. Like so it's like to me like the Tower of Babel could just be a make-believe story. Like Noah's Ark could just be a make-believe story. But to me, we're not that creative of human beings. We keep on repeating the history over and over again because we don't know how to create a new story. Um, and so with the Tower of Babel, it had to be to me something happened, but the God story didn't stick. And even like the Noah's Ark thing, we were talking about how like we are connected to infinite intelligence, and some people call that God. And so I can see Noah being someone that was connected to the infinite intelligence and knew that a storm was coming, knew he had to build an ark, and no one believed him and everyone thought he was crazy. So like there's ways that stories make sense to me now
Mhm.
based off of where I'm at now. Whereas, like you said at the beginning, when I was a Christian, it didn't make sense
Mhm.
because this God was all loving, but then punished in these ways and asked
Yeah.
for sacrifices in these ways. And it doesn't line up, it doesn't add up. And so that's where I'm like, okay, well, how can this actually make sense? Because we're not creative enough to make these stories up, but it has to come from something.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of interesting to see how it could be in those ways. Um, yeah, also kind of like on a side note, I was watching a TikToker recently talk about how she deconstructed from Christianity because she realized that based off of your society, you had a certain kind of God.
Yes.
And
100%. Yeah.
and so I found that really interesting too, of like how we created this God because this is the kind of God that we needed.
Yeah.
And I also remember when I was in theology school learning about that too, in the sense that like the Ten Commandments came because the Jews were used to being like animal-like slaves. So they needed to understand human nature again, like the bare bones fundamentals. And so that's why the Ten Commandments happened because they didn't understand what was healthy or unhealthy kind of thing. I
Yeah.
know I went a little bit of a tangent, but did that answer like kind of what you were asking?
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, cuz like that concept of we're just not creative enough. So you were talking before we got on the podcast too about how like stories like vampires or unicorns or I don't know, werewolves, whatever, like those stories continue on and on and on. And there have been stories like
Yeah.
that for years and years and years. And so the question is, are those things actually real? Because humans aren't creative enough in order to come up with that on their own. Now, one thing I would say, just to play a little bit devil's advocate with this, is, and I say this because I do a lot of marketing, I do a lot of social media, and with marketing and social media, people tend to like certain things and they move together liking those certain things. And so, for example, you look at stories like Hollywood. So Disney has made a lot of sequel videos recently, right? And a lot of people are like, I'm so mad. Why do they keep making the same story over and over again? Because it fucking performs. Disney wants to make money. So Wish was one of their, like, it was supposed to be like their big 50-year anniversary, huge, amazing story that came out, and it flopped because it was a newer, different take on a story. It flopped. But then you look at things like Inside Out 2, and that was like a box office hit. And so the question is it that we're not creative or that we don't like to change? We don't like to see things in a different way, in a new way. And it has to go. I feel like this is how social media works, that if there's going to be a change with what's popular, it has to follow the already set trend. Does that make sense? So if you have a trend right now that's just going completely bananas, in order to get from A to B of a new trend, it has to continue to follow a similar pattern of a trend of a story maybe that's similar, and in order to get to B. Just because it's like, can people handle something that's completely in left field? Like, it's like we have to kind of move together as a whole, if that makes sense. And so you see that in marketing, you see that in Hollywood, because they, for one thing, they want to make money, and so they're going to continue to do things that actually are effective and actually work, right? So it's kind of like, I feel like it's kind of a both and situation, where it's like we aren't creative enough, but we also can't be creative enough, because the culture as a whole has to move with us in order to create that creativity. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we see the human race having progressed at such a slow speed towards our spiritual change, right? Like, we talk about this all the time on this podcast, where it's like, I mean, like, we know that things like telepathy exist. We know that things like connecting to a higher power through things like meditation exists. Like there's a lot of things that have actually been proven scientifically that they do exist. But as a human race, it's been a slow coming over to that side. But you see it happening faster and faster recently. So it's like almost like there was certain energy levels that had to be released in order to move to the higher frequency that we find ourselves in now, and that I think that we're going to continue to find ourselves in, because I do think that we're in a time period where it could happen within 5 years, it could happen within 100 years, 200, 1,000. I don't really know, but like the change for humanity towards realizing that we're more than just our physical bodies. We're more than we're really energy, that we're really actually connected to source in ways that we don't even realize. And to kind of give a little jab to the Christians, that we don't need to believe in a man that died on a cross in order to have that connection to source, to God, that we already are that, and that we just have to realize that we are in order to feel that connection. And I feel like more and more people are starting to come to that side where they're like, wait a minute, I think that, as you said, like culturally, my culture created a God, right, that I followed. And I might have done it blindly and not even realized that what I was continuing to spread with this Christianity or whatever religion you want to put in there was actually more detrimental because I didn't actually know. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, with and my mind literally went blank as you were finishing that. Oh boy. That's so funny. It literally just wiped as I was like, oh, I need to talk about this, and yeah, it's
Yeah.
gone.
No, it's all good. I mean, honestly, like this is like this is something that I don't think we could even like you can't prove this, right? Like there's no way to prove what I'm saying, but you can see it and you can feel it around you, if that makes sense, where you can feel the change that's happening. So to kind of like go a little bit different angle too, you were talking about how like elitists whether they're people or energy forms in this 3D reality have kind of um, controlled like Hollywood. They've controlled, like basically programmed us to think
Hmm.
that we are what we're just flesh and bone, basically, right? So it was interesting because yesterday I was having an experience and I was realizing how easily programmed you can be.
Hmm.
And this was a good programming, but also a scary programming at the same time because of how easy it is to get programmed in the wrong way. So for the past, what is it, 5 years, I've meditated every single day, right? And I listen to a certain frequency of music every single day, right? And so I've basically become accustomed to this frequency of music. And every time I hear it, my body comes alive, right? And it's like, I can't explain it other than there's this full body chill. My body comes alive and I can feel that things are changing just by listening to this music. So
Hmm.
yesterday, I was working in the operating room and was basically at the whim of listening to whoever's music was playing, right? So that song, I can't remember. This is going to be hilarious. You're going to laugh at me when I'm like, I can't remember who sings it, but it's an old song and it's the song Wasn't Me, right? Like
Oh
where
yeah.
it's like the story of he gets
Yeah.
caught by his girlfriend and he's having sex with another girl, the girl next door, basically. And
Yeah.
so we're just listening to that song, and I'm not actively listening to it, but I can feel my body start to wake up, which
Mm.
was like, ooh, holy shit. Like there was a frequency in that song that is very similar to the frequencies that I listen to every day that
Hmm.
was waking my body up, which
Yeah.
in a lot of ways is like, oh wow, like my body is really connected to certain frequencies. But the scary part about, and that I've woken that part of me up, that I can really just by hearing a tone have healing in my body.
Mm.
Because I don't believe that everybody has figured that out yet. It took me a while to figure that out, and now it's just an unconscious, subconscious thing. I can't even tell you how to do it. My body just knows how. So, but anyways, so what's scary about that is people listening to that can get programmed by the words, yes, but the frequency that's happening also. So, a really good thing, but also like when you're pairing it with the words that are being said. So I'm listening to frequencies that are paired by a frequency of Dr. Joe speaking, right? And he, in my opinion, does not have any ill will towards people. He actually wants to see change in this world, right? So I have like paired that positive frequency with that music, right? But then you listen to this frequency of music and it's paired with someone cheating on his girlfriend. And it's like, ooh, that's a little scary. How easily programmed, we don't even realize how easily programmed we are just
Yeah.
by like listening to music like that. Like that's that was like a little bit eye-opening for me because I've had that happen for other songs before. But
Mhm.
generally they're songs like I've had it happen during Taylor Swift songs, which those don't feel
No.
nefarious to me. Like I've had it happen during other songs as well, and they're generally not nefarious songs. But this one kind of scared me a little bit because I was like, ooh, how easy is it to get programmed by a
Mhm.
certain frequency, and then the words behind the frequency and the intention. It's more the intention behind the frequency, because I don't feel
Yeah.
like that song has the best of intentions, because he's like, oh yeah, it wasn't me. Like there's not really remorse until the end of the song where he's like, oh, I'm sorry to the girl that I hurt.
Yeah.
But during the whole song, he's like, oh, it wasn't me. Like I'm blaming someone else, basically, you know? And
Yeah.
so that kind of is scary how easy it is that we can get programmed by things like that.
Well, I think we program ourselves.
Yeah.
Even if a situation unfolds differently, we are so programmed to think it's unfolding a certain way that we think it's happening that way. We
Hmm.
think it's going the way it's always gone before. And then too, like how you were saying with like the Wish movie flopping, like we want familiarity. So we want if we're used to chaos, we create chaos.
Yeah.
If we're used to fighting, we create fighting. And if we're used to blaming others, we continue to blame others. Like it's this constant cycle of the same thing because we're programmed to be that way. We're
Exactly.
programmed to like movies. And that's why we keep on watching like live action movies. And when they made Little Mermaid Black, it was the end of the world. Or
Yeah,
even with
exactly.
Harry Potter, they
Yeah.
made Hermione in the Cursed Child play black, and it was the end of the world and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's crazy how we get so fixated on things needing to be the same, and the same is killing us.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that this reminds me of is just that we, as you said, program ourselves by our thoughts and feelings, right? So we have basically programmed our body. Like I can literally do anesthesia without thinking about it. I could be talking to five people in the room, thinking about what I'm going to eat for dinner and intubating a patient all at once, right? I have done it so many times that my body knows how to do it better than
Mhm.
my conscious mind does, right? And that to me is the part of us that it's time to reprogram that, you know, because when you see something that's not serving you anymore and it's time to like change it, let it go, it is not an easy process, but it is worth it every time. I can tell you, I have noticed. So I think for the past, God, I mean, it's really been the past 5 years that I've really been working on this. But within the past couple weeks, I've started to really see some massive headway for myself. So I do not like the feeling of feeling like I'm behind, of feeling like I have to hurry up, of feeling like I don't have enough time, that things just have to go faster. I hate that feeling. But I have done it since I was a child. And so that has become so programmed in me that that is how I have learned to do everything in my life. Well, I can tell you within especially the past 2 weeks, I don't know why the past 2 weeks, but I have really noticed such a change in myself because every time I notice myself, I've been doing this for years. Every time I notice myself trying to hurry up, trying to speed things up, trying to go, 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 I will like tell myself, no, I can pause. I can take a breather. I don't have to hurry up. This will get
Mhm.
done when it gets done, and it's going to get done exactly when it needs to. And so I've been
Yeah.
doing that for years, right? Within the past 2 weeks, I've felt my body change towards that bend instead of towards the other, which is huge because I have been working on it for so long. But I can see these glimpses of me going, yeah, no, I don't have to do that. And it's a quick thought. I don't have to wait, because what used to be that I would wait in that energetic frequency for a little while before I would stop myself. And then it's like that refractory period just got shorter and shorter and shorter. And now within the past 2 weeks, I've noticed myself almost instantaneously have the thought of, nah, I can
Mhm.
pause. I don't like to feel that way. I don't need to keep running. Now, does that mean that I've completely kicked it? Completely? No, because I have to continue to do this over and over and over again. And the thing that's really easy is to get sucked back into that frequency because a lot of people right now live their lives that way. So that's why it's so easy to get programmed by either people, Hollywood, songs, whatever around us, because if we're around it, it's easier to get sucked back into that frequency because we already have the railroad tracks in our brain that says, oh yeah, I already know how to do this. I can do this. So, and waking that back up, it just takes time of not stopping ourselves from doing it anymore, right? So just like we can unprogram something, we can reprogram it back in, you know? So it's a constant thing of noticing over and over and over again that this is what I'm doing. And I do believe, because I've seen this happen for people, that you can 100% cut out habits just like that. And it's gone forever. It's no longer in your frequency. It doesn't even make you feel like you want to go back to it anymore. But it is a process. And it is
Yeah.
something that you, like, I have seen people, it's gone completely. They are not even tempted by it anymore. However, to get to that point, it is a process. And so for me, I know I've got more work to do, but I can see some really huge headway for myself. And I can even tell you that these are the thoughts that cause things like allergies for me. Those are the thoughts that cause stomach pain for me because when I have those thoughts, I feel myself holding this tension in my gut. And I'm like, yeah, that's where it comes from. That's the thought.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. Like, it's not just me relaxing my gut, it's me also noticing the thought and changing the thought and continuing to do it over and over again. And it's like you're teaching your brain and you're teaching your body at the same time. And the beautiful thing when you get it right, the beautiful thing that happens is that once you get those two, the brain and body in alignment, it's go time. Like
Yeah.
this is honestly when you see people in business explode. This is when you see people in life have some really amazing things come their way. Lots of abundance, lots of people coming their way that they didn't even expect because now they're in alignment. Their brain and body are no longer fighting. So if you're thinking to yourself, I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, but your body is scared to death of where you're going to get your next meal or how are you going to pay that next bill, you do not feel rich. You are not actually in alignment. You have to have your brain and your body, your thoughts and your feelings completely in line in order
Mhm.
to create, to be in that flow that you want to create. And
Yeah.
I personally feel like I've been finding myself here a lot more because like I've manifested a new computer recently. I've manifested bills being paid that were like, how did that get paid? I've manifested money just coming my way and not even like, where did that come from? I have no idea. Like, that's
Yeah.
when you know you're like, okay, I can see it in my outside reality too. I am in alignment. I am creating.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the really cool thing about how it all works is that you can feel it.
Mhm.
And that's kind of like the also the downfall is when you're in like a really negative place, like you were born into a toxic home, you only know toxic relationships, you only know how to be poor, you don't know what it feels like to be rich, you don't
Yeah.
know what it feels like to be healthy, you don't know what it feels like to be in a healthy relationship. And I've heard people be like, well, I was thinking and feeling it. I was thinking and feeling it and it didn't work. And it's like, well, then you weren't feeling it.
Yeah.
And I watched again, like TikTok. I'm not on social media that much. I just really find some really good ones when I um and so I was watching a TikTok where the lady was like, if you don't know anyone that has the life that you want, then you need to find a way to get around those people. And maybe it's watching like podcasts that are of people that have healthy relationships. Maybe it's of watching podcasts of like people that are super rich, because you need to figure out how they feel and how they think.
Yeah.
Because if you've never experienced anyone like that before, you're not going to be able to replicate that feeling. And then you're going to think you are, but you're not, and you're not going to achieve it. So that's a really big thing, is that people think that they're thinking and feeling it, but they really don't know what it feels like. So they're missing it out.
Yeah.
Um, and that's like the whole, like, all of this comes down to like post-traumatic stress disorder. Like I had a really bad accident too, and we don't talk about PTSD very much. But I think that just is coming to my mind, so I think it's important to say.
Mm.
But right after my accident, it was probably like 2 or 3 years later. I was hanging out in, I think it was in Miami, with a guy who had PTSD from the military. And he was talking about how they were told to avoid and avoid and avoid what their triggers were, to not make them get triggered more, to make them worse, and to not have to deal with the actual issues of like what happened when they were triggered. And I'm like, oh, I go about it completely different, whereas
Yeah.
I face my triggers and I reprogram myself.
Yes.
And so I remember this like crystal clear when I left the hospital after my accident. So I woke up in the hospital, and then as soon as I left, however many, it was a little over 2 weeks later, I think it was. Um, I was driving and I was in the passenger seat as my mom was turning left. And I remember having a full-blown panic attack and being like, what was that about? And I literally, as you were talking right now, realized right now what that was about. And I'm like, because I've always been like, oh, it's just so weird. But I've reprogrammed myself so it didn't matter. The why didn't matter, because I was able to reprogram without knowing why.
Right.
I knew the issue. So yeah, the why didn't matter.
Yeah.
But it was because I got hit on my right side. So I would turn left, and all I would see was a whole bunch of cars in that view. And so even though I was in a vehicle and a vehicle wasn't how I got hit, that was super triggering for me. And every once in a while now, I'll still have like flashbacks where I'm like, ooh, but it doesn't, I'm not in that program state.
Right.
So I'll have like a flashback trigger, turning left, like maybe once a year, let's say, probably less than that. And it doesn't take me into that cycle because I have reprogrammed myself out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of go a little bit, I don't want to go too deep into this, but with the whole PTSD and that guy from the army saying, oh, you don't face your triggers, that doesn't make any sense, because if you don't face your triggers, you never leave your bed in the morning. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, that doesn't work.
yeah,
This is how people get really, really sick too, because then they get afraid of everything. I've seen it over and over again from testimonials of people that have healed themselves doing Dr. Joe's work, because they're like, I had to realize that I couldn't be afraid anymore. I had to realize that I needed to settle my body back down into the present moment, that I was safe. I had to remind myself that over and over and over again, that I was safe walking down the street. If you just hide from your triggers all the time, they're still going to be there. They're
yeah,
always going to be there because you're not dealing with it. You're just putting it under the rug and hoping that nothing bad happens to you. But
yeah,
subconsciously, you're sitting in fear. And so you're going to continue to create more fear. You're going to create more triggers over and over and over again, subconsciously, not even knowing it, because that's in your field, because you're
mhm,
afraid and you haven't dealt with it. You haven't sat with your fear. This is
mhm,
why I will, till the day that I die, probably talk about how meditation is so great and how it changed my life, because I had to sit in my
mhm,
fear. I had to sit in my anger. I had to sit in my frustration. I had to sit in my overwhelm. I had to feel it fully. This is how you get over. This is how you get through, because you
yeah,
have to feel it fully. You have to,
mhm,
like, it's literally some days like you're sitting in fire. Like it feels like your body is on fire. But the longer you sit in that, that's when you break the chains of it. That's when you don't feel it anymore. Because I always know if I'm like literally in a meditation and my hands are on fire, or I want to crawl out of my skin, or my whole body feels like I just have ants all over me. I know if I sit with that just a little bit longer, it's going to release something better. This is how you transmute lower level energy. This is how. I don't know how else to do it. Like, to me, this is the only way to sit with it, feel it fully in a completely unconscious, subconscious way, not in a conscious way. I'm not sitting there going, "Oh, I hope this passes." If I do that, then it's not going to pass. It's going to keep going, right? It has to be completely subconscious. Feel it, not in a conscious way. Feel it on that subconscious way. And that's when you transmute it, and it changes into something beautiful. And then your body it's like your body explodes into like bliss, love, all the things that you want it to feel, right? So I could go on and talk about that for days, but but I think we got to cut this one off. So guys, if you're listening on your favorite podcast host, go ahead, give us a 5-star. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. And if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, give us a subscribe. Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments as well. But with that, we're going to call TMI, Advice You Didn't Want, a wrap for today. See everyone next time. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.